My name's Ryan. I'm 32, and for the last 6 years, I've been quietly bankrolling my extended family's illusion of being financially stable. It began with the little things, covering the occasional phone bill, pitching in for a school field trip. But over time, it snowballed into covering their rent every month, paying for car insurance, footing the bill for my niece's tuition, someone I barely interacted with outside of birthdays, and constantly bailing them out of emergency credit card debt that somehow never stopped being an emergency. I'm not wealthy. I just figured out how to handle money more responsibly than most of my relatives. When I landed a solid tech job out of state, I genuinely believed that chipping in from time to time was just part of being family. But there's a big difference between helping someone and getting taken advantage of. Just last weekend, I flew home thinking I was going back for my mom's birthday. I'd already covered the cost of my flight, booked a modest Airbnb, since my old bedroom had been repurposed into a storage closet for craft supplies, and even splurged on a designer purse for my 14-year-old niece, Lily, after seeing her passive-aggressive Instagram stories hinting at it. She made sure I saw those stories. She even tagged me in one where she was manifesting a nail polish shade the week before her birthday. I knew she was being manipulative, but I brushed it off. Maybe she's just a teenager trying to fit in, I told myself. I wish that was all it was. The second I stepped into the backyard, balloons everywhere, loud music blasting, a huge cake decorated in pink cursive, I realized I'd been set up. This wasn't a birthday celebration for my mom. It was an all-out congratulatory bash for Lily, celebrating her acceptance into a private arts high school that cost more per semester than my entire college degree. And sure, she got in with help. I wrote her recommendation letter, paid for the prep classes, but during the slideshow montage on a rented screen above the pool, my name didn't come up once. What I walked into wasn't a birthday, it was a bizarre family talent show. My brother Daniel, Lily's dad, was holding court with a drink in hand, bragging about all the sacrifices they'd made to get her into that school. His wife Megan stood beside him with crocodile tears in her eyes, acting like she personally walked Lily through every part of the application process. Nobody even told me this party was happening, and before I could process what was going on, someone shoved a drink into my hand and called me over to pose for a family photo. I slapped on the same fake smile I've worn at every family reunion and wedding I wasn't invited to, but still helped pay for. Daniel thumped me on the back, hard enough to feel like a warning shot. "Look who finally decided to show up," he said with a smug grin. "Just in time for the toast." Lily strolled over, dressed like she was about to headline Coachella, purse swinging from her wrist like it was radioactive. She glanced me up and down, and loud enough for everyone, including the neighbors, to hear, said, "You're only here because you pay for everything." A few people laughed. Some just looked away, pretending they hadn't heard. Daniel chuckled and chimed in. "Hey, he knows his role." Right, Ryan? And in that exact moment, something inside me just stopped. I took a sip of my drink, no smile, no expression, just stared at the condensation sliding down the glass and waited for the shaking in my hand to fade. The rest of the evening was a blur, clinking glasses, fake hugs, meaningless small talk. Not one person asked me how I'd been, how work was going, or even where I was staying. I was just a background prop in a celebration I had unknowingly funded. As the music got louder and the dancing started, I slipped away inside. I passed a dining table stacked with gifts and grabbed my laptop from my bag. I settled into a corner of the living room, completely ignored, and started typing. Not out of anger, just laser focused. I opened my banking app and began flipping the financial switches. The joint account I'd set up to help Daniel cover his temporary car payments, closed. The tuition auto payments for Lily's school, gone. Every monthly transfer, from streaming services to their cell phone provider, one by one I shut it all down. I sent courteous emails to the utility company, the landlord I'd been wiring rent to, even the subscription box Lily used for her overpriced makeup kits. Canceled. Every single one. Then I pulled out a plain white envelope from my backpack, slipped in a neatly folded printout, listing every payment I'd made on their behalf over the past 5 years. Itemized. At the bottom I wrote a short note in my cleanest handwriting. "This ends today. Ryan." I left the envelope on the kitchen table and walked out while the party raged on outside. Nobody even noticed I was gone. The next morning, I silenced my phone after it buzzed 47 times in under 10 minutes. Daniel, Mom, Megan, even Lily. I didn't read a single message. By the time they found the envelope, I was already buckled in on my flight home. That's when the voicemails started turning nasty. The first one was from Daniel. Daniel's voice came through sharp but calculated, the kind of tone he used when he thought he was being reasonable. "Hey, Ryan, got your little note." Bit dramatic, don't you think? If something was bothering you, you could have just picked up the phone and talked to me. No need to make a whole scene out of it. Call me back, all right? 5 minutes later, Megan chimed in. Her voice trembled halfway through, either fresh from crying or trying to work herself into it. "Ryan, I don't get it. Why would you do this? Lily's devastated. Do you realize how this kind of disruption affects her emotionally? We put our trust in you. You said we were family." By noon, the tone wasn't soft anymore. Daniel again, this time shouting. "You think you can just walk away? After everything we built? After everything we planned together? Lily starts school in 2 weeks, Ryan. 2 weeks. And this is when you decide to lose it?" The voicemails kept coming, but the content shifted. They stopped being about me as a person and started sounding like frantic sales pitches, like I was an investor about to pull funding and they were scrambling to change my mind. But I wasn't bluffing. I powered off my phone, got myself a new number for work, and let HR know I was taking a few days for mental health. No follow-up questions, no judgment. It was overdue anyway. I hadn't taken real time off in 4 years, not that anyone back home had ever noticed. There's a strange kind of calm that comes when you finally stop trying to revive something that's already long dead. For the first time in ages, I wasn't refreshing my bank account every few hours, stressing over whether I had enough left to clean up someone else's mess. I wasn't skipping dentist appointments or sacrificing travel plans so Lily could flash a new phone every September. I wasn't draining myself just so Daniel could pretend his freelance photography dream was anything more than an excuse to avoid actual work. But peace has a short shelf life. 2 days after I got back, my mom called. I didn't pick up, obviously. But the voicemail? "Ryan, sweetheart, I think there's been some confusion. Your brother's just under a lot of pressure. Lily's at a very sensitive age, you know that. We just need to come together. Sit down and talk, all of us, like a family should. Don't punish everyone over one comment. You're better than that. You're better than that." That last line hit harder than I expected. Not because I thought she was right, but because I realized what she really meant. She didn't mean I was morally better. She meant I was supposed to be above fighting back, above drawing a line, above demanding basic respect. And the most telling part? Not once did she ask how I was doing. A week slipped by, then another. My inbox started pinging with overdue notices, all tied to Daniel. The bank informed me that the lease I'd co-signed was now in default. Lily's school sent politely worded reminders that fall tuition hadn't been paid. I ignored every one of them. They'd figure it out, or they wouldn't. Either way, it was no longer my responsibility. But then came the message that turned quiet irritation into pure, focused rage. An email from Lily. Subject line: "Wow, rude. No greeting. No punctuation. No real sentences. Just, 'You said you would always be there. Guess that was a lie. Like everything else, don't worry. We'll figure it out since you clearly think you are better than everyone blocked.'" I sat there staring at the screen, not hurt, just stunned at the level of thankless entitlement. There was no emotion, no regret, just a teenager dripping with smug resentment, typing out bitterness on a phone I paid for, in a house I funded, after a celebration I had no idea I was bankrolling. I almost laughed, but instead I logged into one last account, an old shared cloud drive I had set up for the family to store important files and photos. I reset the password, then I updated the recovery email, and I left one single file in the main folder, a scanned PDF. The title? "You're Welcome." Inside it, every receipt I'd saved over the past 6 years. Over $112,000 documented. Rent, utilities, school fees, flights, cell plans, Groceries, Christmases, emergency cash, all of it. At the very bottom of the file, in plain text, bolded, a one-man bank only stays open when it's respected. No one replied, but I know they opened it. A few days later, there was a knock at my apartment door. I hadn't shared my new address with anyone, but Daniel must have squeezed it out of our cousin, someone who visited once, months ago. I didn't answer, just stood quietly and watched through the peephole as he hovered there, gripping a crumpled envelope in one hand. He didn't knock again. He simply dropped the envelope onto my doormat and left. I waited until I was sure he was gone before picking it up. Inside was a single sheet of paper, scrawled in hurried, furious handwriting. Don't forget who made you. Don't forget who was there before your money. You don't just walk out on your family. You'll come crawling back. You always do. No name, no signature, just that. That night, I packed a small duffel, changed the lock on my door, and scheduled a meeting with a lawyer to remove my name from anything still tied to them. But the final sign that the storm was truly rolling in? It wasn't Daniel, wasn't Mom. It was a phone call from Lily's school. They weren't calling to request tuition anymore. They were informing me that Lily had officially been withdrawn. Not just unpaid. The payment had bounced, completely. A few hours later, a call came in from a number I didn't recognize. Ryan? A shaky voice asked, hesitant and unfamiliar. This is Principal Monroe. Lily listed you as her emergency contact. We've tried reaching her parents, but they haven't answered. I froze right there in my kitchen. My coffee sat untouched on the counter, steam fading, while my heart started pounding. Not from fear, but from something murkier, harder to name. I'm listening, I said, my voice steady. There was a long pause, just long enough to let the tension settle into my spine. Then Monroe cleared her throat, like she was bracing herself. I'll be honest with you, Mr. Mitchell, she began. Formality I hadn't heard in years. No one in my family ever used my last name like that. We don't normally reach out this way, but something happened with Lily. Not dangerous per se, but definitely troubling. I stayed quiet. I knew the script. Say nothing. Give them space to speak. People always rush to fill the silence. She had a bit of an emotional breakdown, Monroe continued. At school, she locked herself in the counselor's office. She was crying, pacing, saying things like, he left us, and he doesn't care anymore. She said you were cutting her off to punish her. Then came the part that hit harder. She ripped up her sketchbooks, said none of it mattered if she couldn't come back here. Something hollow settled inside my chest. Not guilt exactly, just a dull, familiar ache. I'd always sensed that Lily wasn't just another entitled teenager. Somewhere under all the designer wish lists and social media posturing, I think she was a scared kid clinging to the only constant in her life. Me. She's safe, the principal quickly added, sensing the weight on the other end of the line. But we flagged the incident because, well, it felt intense. The school counselor described it as abandonment trauma. She kept asking for you, specifically. I exhaled slowly, realizing I'd been holding my breath. Not because I felt obligated, but because of how much that one request carried. I didn't want to be her emergency contact anymore. I didn't want to be the patch for a family that kept inflicting the same wounds and calling it love. But Lily, she was 14, and somewhere along the way, without permission or planning, they made me her foundation. She's with her mom now, the principal concluded, but if there's any chance you could call her, even just once, I really think it could make a difference. I didn't respond. I just thanked her politely, ended the call, and stared at my phone like it had turned into something sharp, something dangerous. That night I sat alone in my apartment. Clean kitchen, one bedroom. Real peace. The kind I hadn't felt in years. I reached into the back of my closet and pulled out a stack of old journals. Notebooks I hadn't touched since 2019. The pages were full of ambition. Timelines, loan payoff strategies, detailed plans for financial freedom. Scribbles about compound interest, savings goals, side hustles, investment accounts. At the bottom of one page in scribbled ink, I'd written a line I remembered well, jotted down right after Daniel asked me for 10 grand to start a candle subscription business. Don't bleed out trying to be someone else's tourniquet. I had spent years trying to rescue a family that was never actually drowning, just unwilling to swim. They weren't desperate. They were comfortable, entitled. They'd turned my generosity into a policy, an expectation, and got angry when the ATM suddenly stopped spitting out cash. But Lily wasn't Daniel. And that was the emotional knot I couldn't untangle. The next morning I called her. She didn't pick up, and I felt a small wave of relief. But 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper, not angry, not defensive. Uncle Ryan? I leaned back in my chair, eyes on the ceiling. Hey, kid. Another pause. Then came the question. Why'd you stop talking to us? I thought about giving her an easy answer. Blaming work, saying I needed space. Something light. But I didn't. Because no one treated me like family, I said quietly. They treated me like a walking bank account. She inhaled sharply. I heard it. But not you, I added. Not always. You just grew up in it. You didn't make the rules. She didn't reply. But the silence wasn't empty this time. It felt like she was trying to understand, really understand. Finally, she said in a voice cracking with something close to shame, I didn't mean what I said about you only being invited because you pay for stuff. I was just trying to sound cool. Dad laughed. I thought you would too. Lily, I said gently but firmly, you don't have to hurt people to feel important. More silence. Then she admitted, barely holding it together. I think I'm just scared. Everything's falling apart. Dad's yelling a lot. Mom cries when she thinks I can't hear. I heard them say we're going to lose the house. They blamed you. Said, you abandoned us. Of course they said that. They told her I left because I didn't love them anymore. There it was. The classic lie that always surfaced the moment someone like Daniel lost control. Turn a boundary into betrayal. Rewrite the story so the ones holding the knife end up cast as the victims. I let out a quiet sigh. No, Lily, I said gently. I didn't walk away because I stopped loving anyone. I walked away because I finally started loving myself. That cracked something in her. I could hear it, an abrupt inhale, followed by the fragile start of a sob she was trying hard to bury. She sniffled and whispered, I miss you. I closed my eyes. 1,000 thoughts surged to the surface. 1,000 different ways I could answer. But in the end, all I said was, I know. When the call ended, I didn't cry. There was no sense of victory, no bitterness. I just sat with it, letting the silence settle like dust. For a few days, everything was quiet again, until Daniel called. But this time, there was no shouting, no venom, just pleading. He asked if we could meet, said it was important, said it had to do with the envelope. I didn't commit right away, but something in his tone, not pride, not entitlement, just pure, raw desperation, made me pause. I told him we could meet, but on neutral ground. No houses, no family, just him and me. 2 days later, I walked into a small cafe and stopped in my tracks. Daniel was already there, and he looked like someone I barely recognized. His shoulders slumped, his face gaunt. His clothes hung off a frame that had lost too much weight too quickly. He looked like a man who had finally realized what life feels like when the safety net decides to walk away. He didn't say hello, didn't even meet my eyes, just pushed a folder across the table. I opened it, and the chill that ran through me was instant. Inside was a legal notice. Debt collectors. Over $90,000 in outstanding balances. And stamped right there, clear as day, cosigner liable. I stared at those words like they were written in some foreign language. Cosigner liable. And in a sudden sickening wave, it all crashed over me. Even after I had finally cut the cords, after all the effort I made to claw my way free, there was still something tying me down. A hidden vine still wrapped around my ankle, quietly pulling me back into the chaos I'd tried so hard to escape. You never removed me, I said flatly, eyes locked on the document. You promised you would. Daniel shifted, visibly squirming. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands trembling as they cradled a half-empty cup of coffee. I meant to, he said, his voice cracked and low. I really did. We thought you'd come around, that you'd change your mind. That sentence hung in the air like smoke. thin, suffocating, and born from a fire he refused to acknowledge he started. You thought I'd come around, I repeated slowly. So you left my name on your debt, just in case. He gave a small, pitiful nod. I didn't think it would get this bad. No, I said quietly. You just didn't care if it did. I leaned back, folding my arms across my chest as the silence between us grew heavy, thick and undeniable. I wanted him to feel it, not just the weight of my anger, but the clarity that had taken me years to reach, the difference between being a victim and being a volunteer. He broke first. He always did. Look, he muttered, I know I messed up. We messed up. But Lily, she's falling apart. Megan's threatening to leave. I can't focus on anything with all this pressure. The collectors won't stop. And now that the school, she was never my responsibility, I cut in sharply. You made her mine, because that was easier than stepping up as a parent. Daniel winced like I'd slapped him, but I didn't pull back. I couldn't. You coasted on my income and called it love. You let your daughter mock me in front of everyone, and you laughed. You stood there while mom stayed silent, too busy enjoying the benefits to speak up. I was never your brother. I was just your lifeline. Your bank, I didn't know you hated us that much, he murmured. I don't, I said coldly. If I did, I'd have never lifted a finger to help you. But I've finally realized that love without limits isn't kindness. It's self-destruction. He fell quiet. So quiet it almost felt staged. And then, with all the audacity in the world, he said something so outrageous, I actually blinked in disbelief. You could fix this. I stared at him. You could call the collectors, he continued, rushing now. Pay the minimums. Just for now. Just buy us a little time. My jaw clenched. Daniel, I just told you. No, wait, he cut in, his voice cracking, desperate. You're good with money. You said that. You know how to make it work. You love Lily, right? Don't let her suffer for our mistakes. He thought this was his big moment, his final Hail Mary, an appeal to the part of me they'd all drained for years but still assumed had more to give. But I didn't yell. I didn't storm out. I calmly opened my bag, pulled out a folder of my own, and placed it on the table in front of him. What's this? He asked. My lawyer's contact information, I said. Inside is a notice of my intent to legally remove myself from any and all financial associations with you. I let that sink in. It also includes a repayment breakdown of everything I covered for the last 6 years, interest included. Daniel stared at the folder like I'd just handed him a live grenade. You're not serious, he whispered. I'm absolutely serious, I replied, unwavering. You want me to swoop in and save you, but I didn't cause this disaster. I just funded it. I don't have that kind of money, he muttered almost to himself. I know, I replied calmly as I stood up, which is exactly why you'll have to handle it, just like every other adult does. He didn't follow me when I left, didn't say another word. Just sat frozen at the table, staring at that folder like it was a sealed casket. It took nearly 3 months of legal red tape, countless emails with the bank, formal affidavits, back and forth from my lawyer. But eventually I was released from the co-signed loan. It cost more than I wanted to spend, but it was worth every single dollar for the peace of mind it gave me. I also filed an official claim to recoup part of what I was owed. Realistically, I knew most of it would never come back. But at that point, it wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. Around that same time, I got an email from Lily. Not from her usual account, it had been deactivated, but from a new school-issued address tied to a different arts program. Public, less prestigious, but still solid. Subject line, I'm sorry. The message itself was short, raw, real. There were no excuses, no manipulation. Just a few quiet lines that hit harder than any rant ever could. I didn't realize what you were doing for us until you stopped. I hope someday I can be someone you're proud of. Thank you for giving me more than I ever deserved. And that was the first time I cried in years. Not from guilt, but because for once, it felt like something I did landed. Maybe not with the adults, but with someone who still had a shot at being different. Someone who still had time to unlearn the script. I replied simply, you already are. Keep going. As for the rest of the family, in early December, my mom left 2 voicemails. She wanted to make things right for the holidays. Invited me home for Christmas. A fresh start. I didn't return either call. Instead, I mailed a card. No photo, no glitter, no cheerful message. Just one plain sentence in black ink. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give a family is distance. She never called again. Daniel? I heard from him a few months later. Not directly, but through the county courthouse. A formal bankruptcy notice. They'd lost the house. I didn't celebrate. Didn't feel smug. I just slipped the paperwork into a folder I'd labeled closure and set it aside. And me? I moved on. Found a new job with better pay and fewer headaches. I built a smaller, tighter circle of people who didn't need money to treat me like I mattered. I started traveling, not for work, but because I wanted to. Paris, Kyoto, Vancouver. I even launched a blog, documenting my journey, how to achieve financial freedom, how to step away from toxic family dynamics without losing your sense of self. One of my early posts took off, went viral. Thousands of comments poured in. I thought I was the only one. I didn't know you were allowed to walk away. Thank you for reminding me it's not selfish to say no. And sometimes I wonder, did Daniel ever read it? I kind of hope he did. Because in the end, my revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't about destroying anything. It was this. I stopped letting other people treat my peace like it was loose change. And finally, that was enough.